Welcome to the SoLoMo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss topics, trends, tactics, and tools related to social, local, and mobile marketing and advertising. Our goal is to give you the information you need to be a better marketer. Today is Wednesday, January 2nd, 2013, and this is episode number 50.
In this episode, we're going to discuss the most fascinating social media statistics of 2012, how to get a fresh start in 2013, the new data Foursquare is going to make available to businesses, and much more. Hey, Corey, what's going on? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year indeed. Happy New Year both in the calendar and in the social, local, and mobile podcast world. This is our 1-year anniversary. We start year number 2 with this episode, I believe.
Yeah, well, you know, we did good. We were on every single week, and then the last 2 weeks it was just a little bit difficult because of, you know, traveling and holiday stuff and everything, which I think we're allowed to take a couple weeks off, especially after being so dedicated the whole year up until then. But we committed to starting the first week of January right after the new year last year, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to remember exactly when. It was pretty close to the new year. And then, like you said, we made it almost every single week. We took a couple weeks off during the holidays. It's really tough, actually, to record when we're both kind of traveling and on the road and different time zones and all that. So we had to take a couple weeks off, but we are back in full force and ready to hit the ground running in 2013, which is actually a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. So that's a good topic segue.
So let's, you guys can send the gifts to Corey and I, friend us on Facebook and use a Facebook gift. I think it's pretty cool. We talked about it the last episode. But I think most of all, thank whoever it is that's out there that's listening. We get to interact with a lot of you guys on Twitter and Facebook and bumped into you guys in person here and there as well. And we appreciate it. That is what kept us going throughout the entire year. And we've made the decision to keep on moving forward this year as well. So thank you for listening.
So we're going to start out this episode with a look back before we look forward. We've got to do a little review of 2012, and there's a ton of this out there. We actually talked on our last episode about, Facebook and Twitter all doing kind of their year in review, but Huffington Post put together a number of social media statistics, and then iStrategy Labs took it and made it into a nice little infographic. So figured we'd review some of the more interesting points of data, maybe even talk about some that seemed a little interesting or a little off, and just talk a little bit about 2012 so that we know where we're coming from before we head off into 2013. How's that sound?
Let's do it.
So, starting from the very, very top, according to the Huffington Post social media statistics, 1 million websites have integrated with Facebook. That is a pretty impressive number. Though considering Facebook now has 1 billion users, still plenty of room for growth. A lot of websites out there that don't yet have Facebook integration, but at the same time, we are very much living in a connected world, and a lot of that connection filters its way through Facebook at one point or another. So Facebook continues to be the giant that you can't ignore, and I think at this point, I don't really expect any change in that coming into 2013. I think Facebook is still going strong. Yes, there are rumors of, people starting to get a little over Facebook, a little tired of it, moving on to other things, but there really isn't a big competitor in the social network space that I've seen emerge. So, for the near term at least, I think Facebook is set atop the world of social networks. Looking at some other interesting statistics, so jumping down to the Twitter section, it said 69% of follows are suggested by friends. I thought this was a really interesting statistic because it basically is saying that for most users, they're kind of following who their friends tell them to follow. They're saying, hey, you should check this guy out. He's a cool writer. He says funny things. He's got great news, blah, blah, blah. And, I think that makes a lot of sense. For those of us that are, hyper Twitter users, we're out there and we're always searching for new people. But if you're not, if you're kind of the casual Twitter person, yeah, then you're probably, open to suggestions and, listening to what your friends tell you. And when they say, hey, you should check out this account, you probably go and do that. On the marketer side, that means that if you want to get new followers and not just the sort of, social media elite, the people that are using Twitter to follow thousands of people, but if you want to get that sort of average Joe type user, what this is telling me is that you've got to kind of work through your existing Twitter followers. You have to say, hey, if you like our account, recommend it to others, because that's really how people are discovering new accounts. They're discovering through friends. And so, yes, you could kind of sit back and hope that somebody recommends you, but the more active approach to it would be to say, hey, if you like what we're saying here, if you get value out of it, let your friends know. Let your friends know that this is a good account to follow. And I think that might actually be, a good way of getting some quality followers. What about you, Adam? Do you think that makes sense? Do you think companies could take advantage of asking for the follow a little more?
Yeah, I think there's some creative ways of doing it. I'm trying to think of some offhand, but it is interesting to think that a majority of folks follow folks that have been suggested to them. I actually would have thought that number would have been much, much less. Even you talk about Facebook real quick as well. I think this kind of the 1 million websites being integrated with Facebook. There's varying degrees of how you can be integrated with Facebook, from adding just buttons on different elements to actually integrating an application in with it using social sign-in and so on. But for the most part, this is why I believe that Facebook isn't going anywhere for a long, long time, because it is the kind of ID of choice for people on the web. It's the ID card. If driver's license are the ones that everybody uses traveling around in the real world, or your passport while you're traveling, Facebook would be the one used in the social world.
Yeah, very, very true. So looking at Google Plus, these are the numbers that I think were a little bit more up for debate in my mind, but it said 625,000 people join Google Plus every day.
What?
Every time I see that number, exactly. Every time I see it, I'm like, that is a ridiculous number. 625,000 people. That is a ton of people. It's over 500,000 people every single day joining Google Plus. I continue to call shenanigans on that. I want to see
signing up for a Google related service and somehow having a Google Plus account.
Yeah, exactly. Signing up for their 13th Gmail account. Does that count as signing up for Google Plus? I sign up for new Gmail accounts all the time. It doesn't mean I'm re-signing up for Google Plus. Do my multiple email addresses all count in that number? That number continues to seem kind of crap to me, but it's out there, so whatever. The one that was more interesting, though, is that the +1 button, so Google's take on the like button, is used more than 5 million times a day. And that actually kind of rings more true to me, partly because the +1 button affects other things. It's not just Google Plus, it's people that are kind of affecting their own search results. It's built into Google. So, it definitely might be worth considering to add the +1 button to your website if it's not already there, or, at least participate.
Well, it should be because of SEO, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of SEO with the custom search results and all of that Google has really been pushing lately. And so, anytime you can get somebody to click that +1 button on your content, that's going to help you out, because there's only 5 million of these being clicked. That's not a ton. So they kind of have to amplify the result of every time somebody clicks it. It's the whole, for every one click, 10 other people might have clicked type thing. So,
did you see here below, right below it, it says websites using the +1 button increase page traffic by 350%. Now, I would say it likely increases it by quite a bit. 350%, I think, is a little bit far-reaching for those that are listening and go, "Oh my gosh, that's incredible!" I would say 150%, maybe 175%. But 350% is a bit far-reaching. But it does have that effect, and it's been shown, and we even talked about it in an infographic a long time ago, that those who are engaged with using Google Plus and the +1 button have actually seen that have the most SEO impact for their website and for their web pages of all of the social actions from the other social networks.
Again, Google Plus, obviously there's a lot to SEO. It's why marketers care about it. So for our audience, it makes a lot of sense. But for the day-to-day user, I still don't think that Google Plus has caught on. Will that change in 2013? I don't know. But for 2012, it was certainly not the breakout year for Google Plus in any means. Instagram, the everyone's favorite social network to talk about lately. Some interesting numbers, one of which was that more than 5 million photos are uploaded to Instagram every 24 hours. And if you think about it, that's a pretty impressive number. And I actually had my own experience just with the sheer quantity of Instagram photos and how it sometimes even kind of surprises me. So we had talked about the Fat Mum Slim Photo a Day challenge, and I'm kind of taking that back up in 2013. That's one of my own personal resolutions, is to be more active in photography, and that felt like a good way of motivating myself. So today's challenge was called Something New. So I took a picture of a new poster that I had framed. I posted that up as Something New. And then I clicked on the Something New hashtag because I wanted to see how many other photos had been submitted, just as part of this, program that started small and grew kind of via word of mouth. So just today, there were 84,000 photos uploaded with the hashtag Something New, which are, 99% involved with the Fat Mum Slim Photo Challenge, and the other 1% is probably spammers taking advantage of trending hashtags. But, 85,000 photos in a single day about a single topic. I posted my photo and I checked like 3 minutes later and my photo had already jumped out of like the first 3 pages of photos because other people had posted their own photo on top of it. It's incredible how many photos are being exchanged on Instagram. And part of that is just how addicting the site is. They talk about time spent on Instagram versus Twitter. The average Instagram user is spending 257 minutes, and I'm thinking this is per month. They didn't actually mention the time frame, but 257 minutes per month on Instagram compared to 170 minutes on Twitter. So, basically for every 2 minutes spent on Twitter, 3 minutes is spent on Instagram, and this kind of matches up my own experience. I know if I've got 5 minutes to spare, I'm probably jumping on Instagram first before I jump on Twitter lately. So, I think that Instagram definitely had a lot of success in 2012, and I see that continuing to increase in 2013. What about yourself, Adam? Are you still bitten by the Instagram bug, or are you starting to move on to something else?
Instagram is definitely my go-to, and I think for brands, it's going to continue to be the go-to in regards to photos. I mean, Twitter is a whole different beast, and it does what it does well. But I think Instagram is still going to be the place to go, and I don't see anybody making a dent anytime soon in that.
So last one here on this infographic, we've got a quick look at Pinterest. So a couple interesting stats, which I think kind of add together to a larger point. So first off, it said 80% of pins are repins, and this makes a lot of sense. I've actually read a similar statistic for Tumblr, which is that the amount of people actually creating content is very small in comparison to the total amount of content shared. There's really a core group that's out there. They're adding original pins, they're adding new content, but for most users, they're subscribing to people, they're finding what they like, and they're kind of curating it onto their own account. So I think it's important to keep this in mind, along with the idea that, it said pins with prices get 36% more pins than those without. So combining those two, what it tells me as a marketer is, A, you've got to be out there putting your own pins out there, and then people will follow your account and repin those, but you can be your own source of original pins. And two, if you're doing it and you're pinning things that are available for sale, make sure to include the price. People want to see prices because they're using Pinterest as sort of a fun browsing way of shopping. And, if you're in that shopping mentality and you see that price tag, and hey, maybe it's a little lower than you were expecting, and you think to yourself, oh, that's kind of a deal. You're more likely to click through, you're more likely to buy from that pin. So if you are a retail establishment, step one is create your own account so that you have control over the images and the copy that goes along with your pins. And step two is make sure to include prices, because people actually do keep an eye out for that and are surprisingly more likely to click something if it has a price attached than if it does not.
And on Pinterest, you can look by prices, actually. You can actually filter that. So, if you want to be found in that. And you were talking about the 80% are repins. I think people don't realize how significant the delta is between or how significant the amount is of the folks that are resharing content in most social networks versus those that are actually creating the content or curating the content from elsewhere. So this sort of statistics reigns true both on even Facebook when it comes to, the content that's shared there is not usually content that people they themselves have created. It's content that they found elsewhere from brand pages and things like that. Same thing again, like you said, for Tumblr. So I think this provides a big opportunity for brands to take advantage of creating their own content or being a curator of content.
All right. Well, that was a fun look back at 2012, but 2012 has come and gone. Let's move on to the exciting stuff, which is 2013. We are now in 2013. Hard to believe. But along with personal, goals for growth and resolutions and all the fun things that we like to do at the start of a new year, I think it's also a great time to kind of give your online social media presence a fresh start and maybe create a few business-related resolutions or, look back and think, hey, here's what happened in the past year. What can I do differently this year to improve the results that I'm getting? So, Adam, we took a little time to think through some of the steps and things and processes you can go through to give yourself a fresh start in 2013. So why don't we go through a couple of those and just kind of talk it through, and, we can kind of treat this as a discussion. I think that there's no hard and fast rules, but these are some things that we were thinking about and that we're doing ourselves for our own accounts. So it makes sense just to share these with the listeners and, at least give people some ideas for things that they could be doing to improve their results for 2013. So where do you want to start?
Start at the top. So you a lot of people go straight in, like you said, and they're picking out their New Year's resolutions and stuff and forget about kind of taking advantage of this time to renew some of the things that they've been doing with their digital marketing. And so one of the first things that we've got here is about taking a look at your social profiles. The ones that you might forget that you have, the ones that might be abandoned, the ones that might need a little sprucing up. The suggestions that we have is first and foremost, look at all of them and make sure that the information is accurate. A lot changes from year to year. A logo might be different if the company has, changed their branding. It may be that the phone number is different. It may be that you want to just tighten up some language that you had on there you didn't realize because you didn't take a peek at that particular portion. I'd say some of the places you might see this happen where you forget what's there are your LinkedIn business page, for instance, the actual company page for LinkedIn, where you kind of set that profile and forget it. And same thing for even your Facebook brand page or your Google Plus brand page, where you just kind of put the profile information and you leave it. So the description of your business and the graphics and branding elements used, you probably want to pay attention and just kind of give it a once over for the new year.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, we talked about it. We've tried to hammer home the point that you need to make sure your data is accurate. So step one is to go through and just double check, triple check, make sure things like your phone number, your address, all of that information is current and accurate. But I also like the idea of reviewing some of the things that you probably haven't looked at in a while. So I know even for my own personal account, every once in a while, maybe every 6 months, I try to look at that About Me area of Twitter. It's the little 140 characters they gave to describe yourself. And usually I look at it and there's something I want to change about it, whether it's tightening up the language a little bit or maybe just changing, some phrasing. But it's something where it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And so unless you actively seek it out and think to yourself, I should probably review that and update it or maybe change a little bit, tweak the language, keep it fresh, it can kind of grow stale on you. And it, maybe it's something that you typed in when you very first set up your account a couple years back and you just haven't looked at it. And now it reads as really stale. So, in addition to the things like phone numbers, all the data, I think it's also a good idea just to kind of look at the branding of your social profiles and make sure that that's in tip-top shape as well. I like that suggestion.
And pay attention to the potential abandoned or the profiles that have very low engagement. So, there sometimes people say, hey, it's free to create a social profile. I'm going to go ahead and try that new MySpace. We're going to create something out there. Well, you might not be paying much attention to it because it's not getting, maybe the critical mass hasn't happened yet. The 655 million people aren't going there like on Google Plus. I'm just kidding if you heard the beginning of the show. But one way or another, time is money. And if you've got to spend time working on profiles and trying to syndicate content and manage that and monitor that channel, it may not be worth it. And when people end up maybe Googling something for your brand or your business and bumping into that profile and it looks like it's stale, it's not always the best face to show to potential customers or clients that are out there on the web. Corey, you had a really good one that you added to this list as well about auditing and updating your passwords, about paying attention to, I don't know if you've ever had that happen where maybe somebody who worked at the company left and maybe they didn't leave at the best of terms and they had access to passwords and all those sorts of things. And I know a few people that have been out of work at a particular company for, say, 3 years, and they're still able to access the intranet in order to check out a file that they once had on that a long, long time ago. And the same can be said for social profiles as well, right?
Yeah, this is a big one and an important one. And I think that the start of the new year, it's kind of, I think, what is it, July 4th, you're supposed to check the batteries in your smoke detector or something like that. I always look at January 1st as the day that you should really just wipe the slate clean on all of your online passwords, reset everything, pick new ones. And a lot of this just has to do with, things that are kind of outside of your control. So you'll see every once in a while, 8 million passwords leaked in some sort of document. And if you see a news story like that and you're all frantically thinking, could mine be the one? It's probably because you don't update your password often enough. So for myself, I've kind of ranked all of my different online profiles with, online banking being right at the top, and then down below is something like a, Spotify type service where it doesn't really matter if somebody got into that account. And so those top tier ones, I'll actually try to change those every 3 months. And then some of the lower ones, 6 months or once a year, changing that password. But the idea is just try to refresh your passwords. And there's a number of reasons for that. The first off is, again, if suddenly this huge file with all these passwords gets leaked, but the data's a little bit old and you've changed your password recently, you don't have to worry. You know that, hey, this is 6 months old and I changed my password 3 months ago, I'm in the clear. The second is it's sort of cutting off people that maybe you didn't even realize had access to your accounts. Maybe it's that person that was working for you 6 months back and isn't working for you anymore, but still does have the username and password to one of your online accounts. Or maybe you approved a online application to access and post to your Twitter account, and then suddenly that application got bought by somebody else, and now there's the potential for something to get posted that you don't really want posted there. So by kind of wiping the slate clean, updating your passwords, it'll give you peace of mind. It'll prevent things that may have happened in the past from affecting your Twitter in the future. And in general, it's just a good practice to have. So I think, use the start of the year, go through, change things, especially something as important as, your company's Twitter handle, where, if something bad got posted onto that account, it could be a lot more devastating than, if somebody got a hold of your personal account and you had to delete something. That's probably not as important or, as potentially dangerous to something as valuable as your online Twitter account.
So we got a lot more to get to, so we're going to go on to kind of our next group of things, talking about content, creating content, monitoring content, and such. And so one of I'd say it doesn't have to be the first thing that you do, but one of the things you really should do is take a look at your 2012 analytics. And that could be your Google Analytics or otherwise, and just see if there's any interesting insights. Were there any topics that you discussed or pieces of content that really caught on fire? Should those pieces of content or topics be revisited again in other formats? Could those end up help drive you and your departments or your marketing team to build out a program related to that, or any sort of insights you might see from checking out your analytics? And even in reviewing your content and keyword strategy, see if you do have a content and keyword strategy, what you should be thinking about the sort of phrases and words that you're going to be using for both SEO purposes and otherwise. Take a look and see sometimes phrases that are popular and that drive a lot of inbound traffic, in particular on search engines during 1 year, change and shift over time. The language or words or phrases become maybe more or less popular, maybe can kind of change and morph into something else. So I think you want to pay attention to those things and review your keyword strategy, which is most useful for SEO, both on your website and on any sort of searchable content like your blog posts and even PDFs that you have hosted online. What do you think of that, Corey?
I think that makes a lot of sense, specifically to SEO, but also in addition to reviewing your keyword strategy, I think kind of reviewing your content strategy. So looking back and, trying to bucket the content that you put out in 2012 into a couple of larger buckets, and then just reviewing some of your data and diving in and seeing, did it work? Did you get a better response for one type of content over another? And can you take that learning and apply it towards your content planning for 2013? So, a lot of companies right now are starting to develop their editorial calendar for the coming year, especially larger macro themes. And, it's one thing to kind of just sit down and say, all right, well, here's 6 topics that we want to cover, and these feel like they're the right direction to go. But it's another to be able to look back and say, all right, we know, these 3 topics performed well, these 3 topics didn't. Let's put our focus on the 3 that did well and really continue to kind of follow that up. Maybe come up with a 2.0 version of that topic, or give it a fresh new spin and move away from the things that didn't work, because, data doesn't lie. And sometimes it feels like the right way to go, and you look at the data and it just didn't work out the way you thought it would. So in addition to keywords, I think just reviewing your content plan in general is a great way to give yourself a fresh start.
And being able to determine a cool way to determine things that have been most popular and least popular with your audience is by looking at your Google Analytics and looking at it. If you look in the content section of Google Analytics, you'll be able to actually see you can sort by what are the top, it'll rank it, showing you what are the most popular by visits, or whatever other metric you decide you want to look at it at. What are the most popular posts that you've had on your blog, and you can take a look and say, let's take a look at those top 10 that we had there and why were those popular. This kind of goes back to taking a look at your analytics in general and the type of content you spread across all your networks. And all you have to do is just resort it, and you can see what the bottom 10 things are as well, 10, 20, whatever it is you feel like doing. But I think sitting down and reviewing that with your team and paying attention to why were these popular on our blog and why were these not popular, and the popular ones you can revisit and even maybe update them. They might be what would be called evergreen content that really doesn't grow old, might get a little outdated, but it's a topic that you could bring up versus kind of a more timely topic, which is, something regarding some news event happening with your company or in your industry that has already passed and is old news at that time.
And when you're reviewing content, I think one of the other things you can review is the type of content that you shared. So one of the things that you had mentioned, Adam, was reviewing distribution outlets and seeing if there are any opportunities to use something new. And one of the examples being, maybe you could publish slide decks on SlideShare. For a B2B company, that's a huge strategy and something that often gets overlooked. But if you've got content that might work well as a slide deck, maybe SlideShare is something you should be taking a look at in 2013. On the flip side, maybe you put out a couple of videos in the past year, and for whatever reason, those got a really strong response. Well, maybe as a result, you look at really building out a YouTube channel or diving into Vimeo, depending on the type of video content that you're putting out there. So I think looking at the type of content and then evaluating if there are different or better or new channels that you could be experimenting with in 2013. I think you have to be careful with this. You don't just want to continue to pile on. You might want to do a sort of one in, one out, where, hey, if you're going to really put a lot of focus into YouTube, maybe you drop focus from an older channel that you're not getting a good response from. So, let's say you took a crack at Tumblr in 2012, it didn't really work out, your content didn't fit, it always felt like a little bit of a stretch. Maybe you drop that channel and put your focus onto a new channel and see if you can get a result out of that in the coming year.
Yeah, when people ask me, what should I do? And I only have a certain amount of time, I'd say, let's first audit what it is that you're doing and see what isn't really bringing you the results. And you're likely spending time on trying to achieve results with them, or just kind of, spin your wheels with whatever that channel or tactic or whatever might be. And I'd say that's the thing that goes first. You trim that fat and you start inserting some new things like you were just talking about, Corey.
Yeah.
So then the next thing we're going to talk about a little bit is your gear, the hardware. We always kind of fixate on the software part of things, being online and using social networks and such. But, when it comes to creating content, having some good gear is always helpful, and being able to manage even what you're doing using something like a tablet or a smartphone. I don't know about you, but it's always nice every now and then to take a look and see if you've got some old iPhone or old Android device sitting around that just doesn't have, for instance, a very good camera. And if you're somebody who's in the field and has an opportunity to take photos of things that are happening related to your brand while you're out there, and you just don't have a good camera on the phone, you might not think about that initially, but that would be an important thing to consider. And, even one that shoots video or HD video, if you'd like to even do that while you're out and about. But let's get a little bit bigger and go beyond that. We're not talking smartphones and tablet cameras, but actually purchasing real video cameras and real, still photo cameras, which nowadays, if you get good ones, actually do take video as well, very good video. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but so Corey, I made a recent purchase and I ended up buying one of the new Canon 6D, not 60D, but just the 6D. And I didn't know that the camera had only come out about a month ago, even me being kind of a gadget guy. But the interesting thing about the camera, which I really, really love, which kind of justified to me a little bit more of the premium price on top of buying maybe a lesser expensive camera, is that it has built-in Wi-Fi and GPS. And the GPS and such is cool, but the Wi-Fi aspect, it actually connects directly to my phone. So I can actually take full resolution, great shots with this beautiful camera, and then I can connect to my phone and I can browse the photos and download those directly using an iOS application, which would likely run on my iPad as well, and then take those and immediately distribute them wherever it is I want. So if I want it to be on Instagram or on Facebook, or if I want to send it to our blog team, it not just sends it to the phone, but additionally directly from the camera itself, it can connect to Wi-Fi and actually post to Facebook and post in a few other places. And usually that feature is a bit cheesy for something as like high end and nice as a DSLR camera. But they've done a really, really good job. And I think in the future, this is going to be the case where most of these devices that previously just kind of did their thing and needed to be tethered to a computer will be able to connect to Wi-Fi and kind of do a little bit more quicker, be quicker about sharing with other devices and social networks.
Yeah, I think that's, great tip, and awesome to hear that you were inspired to pick up a 6D. That's a great camera from what I've heard, a lot of nice features, and I think that's a good kind of way of going about it. Again, it's looking back at what worked and then finding out ways of doing that better in the coming year. So if you got really engaged with Instagram in 2012 and saw a good response from that, maybe it is time to pick up a different camera, or, maybe just buy a couple of lenses for your phone that'll give you a little bit of fun, a new way of looking at things, a new way of creating content. If you were playing around with video and video is working well for you, maybe, you pick up a nicer SLR camera that does really high quality video, or maybe you look at something like a GoPro camera that you could get different perspectives and sort of, a new way of filming things that wasn't possible before. It's finding what's working and then finding new ways of doing that, and ways of keeping yourself engaged in that content, because that's how you're going to create really engaging stuff. If you get stuck in this rut of, these are kind of the videos that I make and I do them because they get a good response, but I've made so many of them that I'm kind of tired of it now. Sometimes just a simple, gear change, a new piece of hardware can reignite that fire that got you first really excited about that, and, get you back to creating top-notch content and not just passable content that gets the job done.
So, Corey, you probably use a lot of services which would be called SaaS, right? Software as a service tools. Not just obviously social media stuff could be considered that, I guess, in a way, but just tools to help you manage things up there in the cloud, and even some of the cloud storage services that are out there. What do you think about taking a look at some of those services that are out there and kind of dropping those to the wayside that aren't doing the job, and kind of exploring what might be new and what might be useful for you in 2013?
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. I would say that the number one reason to test and see if you need to be using a better tool to organize is what percentage of your day-to-day communication happens inside of email. If you are doing 99 to 100% of your organization and your collaboration inside of email, it's probably time to find something that works a little better and is designed more specifically for collaboration and content creation. So whether it's Dropbox, Google Drive, Google Docs, Evernote, all of these things have built-in sharing mechanisms and work a lot better for managing a team. If it's just yourself, you can use pretty much whatever system you want. But when you've got to get a couple of different people organized, it makes sense to use a tool that's, includes things like versioning. It includes things like notes. It allows everybody to access that document from multiple platforms, whether it's desktop or mobile or tablet. I know that I push a lot of people towards the Google Docs route. First off, because most people have Gmail accounts, so it's pretty easy to set up. You're not asking them to go out and purchase new software, but also it's really familiar. It's very similar to using kind of a shared Word document or a shared Excel sheet. But being Google, you can have multiple people reviewing it. You can have notes. You can have everything kind of synced and collaborated on. And so it works really well for organizing a large group of people and making sure that everybody's on the same page, because I think that's important and increasingly important as the number of channels that we're on increases and the number of different types of content that we're all producing increases. You need to really keep up with the organization side of things and not, get complacent in what you've been doing just because it's working so far. I think as you start to add new channels and add new content, you've got to reevaluate the way that you're managing that and streamline the process whenever possible.
And also, a lot of people are now working in what would be considered virtual teams. They're not all in the same office. So people are in the field, untethered by their computers now that they're using mobile devices and such. And so being able to use these cloud-based things and internet-based tools, it really kind of helps bolster your ability to be mobile and be remote, but still working together as a team. Are you using a tool right now to help you kind of manage and schedule out your Facebook posts or your Twitter posts, and nowadays even your Pinterest posts and things like that? If you are, could you use a better one, or is that one working the way that it should for you? When it comes to actually curating content or capturing ideas, are you using something like an Evernote, for instance, which is something that I use quite heavily? And I think Evernote, there's a lot of other sort of note-taking and idea capturing tools that are out there, and whatever floats your boat is great. But Evernote being free and basically everywhere, meaning it's on every sort of device and operating system, it's on the web, and it's on your desktop. You can share it with multiple people. Evernote is an incredible tool for free, and you could pay the very minimal fee on top of that if you want to use it more heavily. Are you using a measurement service, basically an analytics service? Are you beyond Google Analytics? There's things that help you get more insight into things going on with Facebook, all the other the networks that you're using, and even track your content out as it floats around on the social web. Are you even using something to measure performance? Are you just kind of putting things out there and hoping for the best? And whenever you see somebody retweet you or at reply back to you that you think that, great, I got some action there, having to pay attention to that instead of having that all be collected into one place is not a really efficient way of doing things. And then, Corey, what do you think about listening stations? We talk about kind of analytics, but I think kind of listening stations, as I call them, are a little bit different than just kind of simply paying attention to analytics, right?
Yeah. And I think, for all of these listing stations, social media management, collaboration, it's a very competitive space. It's something where there's always a lot of companies that are out there trying to create a new tool, a better tool, a more efficient tool. So even if you're happy with what you're using, it's always worth at least keeping an eye on what's out there and seeing if there might be something better that's more suited to your own personal style. I think the reason that there are so many different listening stations and social media management platforms is that there's a number of different styles. And so all of these kind of cater to different size businesses, different needs. And so I think it makes sense to check out what's out there. At least be aware of competitors in the space. Maybe pricing changes have happened recently. Maybe new features have emerged that the service that you're using hasn't adapted to yet. So use this time. If you're happy with what you've got, it doesn't mean you have to change it, but it at least means you should be aware of what's happening in the industry and, keeping an eye on things that are making progress or maybe making big changes and might better suit where you're at 6 months down the road or a year down the road. And so it's worth keeping track of those and just staying in touch with the companies responsible for those tools.
I'm not sure if you mentioned it there, Corey, but a lot of these tools, because they're subscription based, you can either upgrade or downgrade your account. So I really suggest taking a look at seeing, the higher versions usually have, better features or more storage or whatever the case may be. Take a look and see if, at the time you purchased that tool, was it the package just right for you at the starter, and then you were just waiting for the next one level up? I think, evaluate whether or not the year of using that tool or the 6 months of using that tool, or however long it's been, the extended time you use that tool, whether or not you felt that the plan you were using was enough, and whether you should go up or go down in order to find something that's more effective for you, or even save some dollars if you need to downgrade it. Some of the kind of miscellaneous things that we want to end off here with that are really just as important as everything else. Do you actually have a social media policy in place? And have you reviewed it to see if it's needed to change for the upcoming year? Is there something that was missing in 2012 or whenever it was last looked at that needs to be implemented now or changed for 2013? Have you then, after reviewing it, made sure that all the new hires have seen it, that any of the changes that have been made have been re-reviewed by the folks that were previously hired to make sure that your company and all of your staff are on the same page? I think this is really important when it comes to the content, which is to take a look at your editorial process and see, do you even have one in place? And are you, is it effective? Has it been effective at helping you create high value, steady content? Meaning that your content is going out on a regular basis. You're not trying to bite off too much, more than you could chew, and that the level of content, the quality of the content is of high value, so that your audience is actually engaged with it, reacting to it, and finds a value in consuming it. What do you think about that, Corey?
Yeah, I think this is another one of those cases where it's likely something that, maybe you wrote or you put together a couple years ago, and it's served you well for the years that it's been in place, but eventually you've got to go back and make sure that you review these things. So social media policies, especially if there's new tools that have emerged, new channels, new ways of interacting, you've got to make sure that your social media policy addresses that. For editorial content, you've got to go back and think, okay, does it still apply to some of the new ways of communicating that are starting to emerge? So one example would be, companies that are really on the cutting edge right now are looking at things like Snapchat and things like Poke and figuring out, okay, this is, big, it's growing, it's the next kind of potential social network that's going to go huge. How do I get involved? And, how does my social media policy address something like a Snapchat, which is really a brand new style of communication? It's not something that really existed 6 months ago. So unless you wrote your social media policy, 30 days ago, it's probably not going to address something like Snapchat. So you might not need to do a full rewrite, but you should definitely review it, make sure that you at least give it a once over and make sure that you are making updates to address changes in the overall social media landscape.
And kind of lastly, do you have a social media engagement plan? And does that, in the sense that when something happens, how is your staff or yourself going to react? And both in negative and positive situations, when somebody reaches out and says how cool something was when they experienced your product or your service, it's always nice and it feels good. And you want to go out and say, thank you very much, because you're making me look good and you're making our job easier and so on. But there comes a time where every once in a while, and it's inevitable, that there's a negative review on someplace. Maybe it's on Amazon or elsewhere. There's negative comments on a blog post or tweets, or somebody created a video against your brand and against your company. These things happen from time to time. And how are you going to interact with them? Is your staff prepared for it? If you're not the one directly doing it and you have somebody in charge of that, are they going to be capable and armed with what they need to be armed with in order to deal with that stuff in a constructive fashion? I would suggest looking at those as opportunities when they're appropriate and they're not just kind of trolling folks that are looking for a rise out of your brand. But I think taking advantage of those as an opportunity to communicate both to your customers and to those that might actually see that video or blog comment or whatever, who haven't commented. They're not the ones actually commenting, but they're seeing it and they're wondering, how are these folks going to respond? But also your team themselves, who might be able to take some of that negative criticism and turn it into something special, whether it be a new product or a change to a policy you have in place with your company or something like that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this basically boils down to kind of taking your social media engagement to the next level. So you've been doing a lot of things over the past year. Some of it's working, some of it hasn't. Maybe you've been kind of running and gunning on some things, and it's just time to sit back, look at what's working, look at what's not, formalize some of your process, write things down, share it with others, and really just prepare yourself to, again, take things to the next level. I think that a lot of times what happens with social media, because it's so constant, it's not like marketing where, you do one campaign, that campaign ends, you review the results, then you look and prepare for the next campaign. If you're doing Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, you're doing these every single day. And so sometimes you just forget that you've got to take a step back and review the overall kind of macro environment that you're working within, because there isn't a natural break. So, something like the end of the year can serve as just that reminder to go back, write things down, share things, prepare things, get yourself set up, put plans in place, and get some of that stuff that's just lived in your head for the last 6 months down and onto a paper or into a document or shared with others, because that's going to enable you to take that next step, to be ready when that next social network emerges. And you've got to capture that, but you've also got to get people to continue doing what you've been doing and what's been working well for you. So, hopefully over the past year, you've been listening to this show, you've been getting a lot of good tips, but I think now is a great time to just look at things on a very broad level and say to yourself, okay, what's working? What should I be doing more of? And what kind of formal process or documenting do I need to do to make sure that, it's not just myself that's aware of what's working, but others can be aware and capitalize on that as well.
Totally agree.
Well, we've got a abbreviated lightning round, but that doesn't make it any less important. So we should...
Boom, thunder, lightning, right, just one strike. All right, let's go for it.
Single strike of lightning. All right. Well, we've got 60 seconds on the clock, so let's dive right into our single lightning round topic. Ready and go. So Foursquare jumped on the let's change our terms of service bandwagon and made a couple of small adjustments to their data policy. But what's interesting is these were, very positive signs for marketers that are putting their efforts into a Foursquare campaign. So the first change is that they're going to enforce the use of full name sharing. So basically, when you checked into a location previously, Foursquare would share that with the location, but they were only sharing first names. They didn't really have a policy in place. So now what they're doing is actually sharing full names with the places that you check into. And what this is allowing those locations to do is get a better idea of who's checking in, how frequently. They can make better use of the data. The other thing that they're doing is giving businesses more access to that data, which I think is going to be great. If you're a business that's using Foursquare, definitely some things to pay attention to, because they're going to allow you to do more in 2013. All right, Adam, 60 seconds on the clock. What do you think about these changes? Do you think Foursquare is continuing to make positive moves that could help us marketers? Ready and go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that these sorts of changes have nothing to do with really helping the users personally. There may be some users that might get a little bit upset over it and everything if they know that much about it. They kind of did it under the smokescreen of Instagram with their kerfuffle, but they're doing it in order to provide better, more accurate data to the end user that they do care about the most, which is basically the venue owners and the brands and businesses and so on. This is showing that they're getting kind of, I wouldn't say less serious about the check-in and so on, but they're getting more serious about themselves as a big competitor to other location-based platforms like Google Local and Yelp, of course. I get to save my 5 seconds there.
All right, bonus seconds. Saving us from the lightning round sound. Coming to the rescue. All right, well, with the first episode of 2013 underway, we will call this one a wrap. But we covered a lot today, so we would love to hear from you. If you have any topic suggestions, questions, feedback, or even if you just want to say hi, make it your resolution in 2013 to get to know your SoLoMo show hosts a little better. And if you'd like to do that, there's a number of ways you can reach us. The first and probably easiest is via Twitter. We are both reachable at SoLoMo Show. Or if you'd like to reach us directly, I'm available at Corey O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi. You can also email us directly. We have our SoLoMo Show email, which is SoLoMoShow@gmail.com. Corey's nodding, which means that I said every single consonant and vowel in there. SoLoMoShow@gmail.com. You can also connect with us. We have a Facebook page where we share things about the show and share just things that we find throughout the week between shows. Also on Google+. We have a Pinterest account for our brand, so you can go and check out the multiple boards that we have on there and repin the show episodes and other content to your heart's delight.
There you go. And all of the links that we just discussed, as well as links to the topics that we covered today, can be found in the show notes, which are available at solomoshow.com. Each episode gets its own little post. We always throw in a bunch of show notes. It's a great way to take a deeper dive into the topics that we cover. Maybe investigate things that you were intrigued about and we didn't get a chance to cover it to the extent that you would have liked. You can actually dive into the show notes and oftentimes get additional information, supplementary info, read the full statistics. We talked about an infographic today, so you can get a link to that infographic if you want to check that out. So definitely encourage you to do that. Again, those are available at solomoshow.com. And with that, we will call this episode a wrap, and we hope that you come back next week for another great episode of The SoLoMo Show.
Take care.